Okay, in this lesson I want to talk about the basis of good cooking. And if you're wondering, we do these lessons walking through the street because I think it's way more interesting than sitting in a boring empty room or a sound studio, okay? So we're walking through the streets of New York, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the foundations of good cooking. So good cooking just comes down to a combination of flavor profiles and textures, okay? So let me give you a quick example. When you go to a place like Noma, for example, or a fancy restaurant, think of a Michelin star restaurant, what they're really doing, okay, is they're taking a basic ingredient, let's say a strawberry, and they're manipulating it into a form that you're not typically used to, okay? So maybe they're making that a foam, maybe they're making that a gelée or a jelly, maybe they're making that into a cracker, okay? So there's that element of surprise of, wow, I've never had this artichoke or strawberry or other vegetable in this form, and then they're just assembling the dish using a basic flavor profile, and that is salt, sugar, spiciness, usually some sort of umami, okay? And then you're playing with textures. So you're dealing with crunch, you're dealing with jelly or jelly, you're dealing with a soft, squishy element usually, you're dealing with liquids like soups, think broths, okay? And so, for example, if you take a dish, let's say, let's come up with 3 random ingredients: squash, pigeon, and pecorino romano cheese, okay? What they're gonna do is they're gonna apply a pretty traditional technique to your pigeon. So that's gonna be either a carpaccio or a tartare for raw. That's gonna be either roasted, that's gonna be poached, okay? And then when it comes to the artichoke, they're either gonna transform that into, like I said, a cracker, they're gonna transform it into a puree, you know, they're probably gonna do something crazy. Maybe they're gonna pickle it or ferment it, right? And then when it comes to the other elements of the dish that they add on top of the base elements, they're gonna say, do we have enough salt? Do we have enough sugar? Do we have a bit of chilliness? Do we have bitterness? Do we have umami, right? Do we have sweetness in this? So maybe they add sweetness with honey. Maybe they add sweetness with a reduction of some sort. You know, maybe they add salt with a little bit of chili infused salt, or maybe they add salt by using seaweed, right? So when you start layering together all these elements, that's when you end up with a dish that's like pickled artichokes with pigeon tartare and a, you know, fresh broth poured over of pecorino romano cheese, right? Whatever it is, all right? All I'm saying is that when you go to these restaurants and have these sublime experiences of dishes you've never thought of or created, it's because they're masters at changing the traditional form of the product and then working across the entire flavor profile. So what you can learn from that is that in your own cooking at home, you can apply similar methods. And you don't have to be Rene Redzepi, you don't have to be a master chef to do this, okay? But a perfect contrast is, think of a plain, cold piece of tofu, okay? Nothing to it, right? It's pretty one-dimensional, okay? You have a little bit of fat from the tofu, but it's basically flavorless, you know? And you think about what makes tofu taste good. You marinate it in soy. You can glaze it. That adds a bit of sweetness. The soy is adding a little bit of salt. You add chili to that. Now all of a sudden it becomes spicy, right? You add texture. Let's say agaradashi tofu style. You deep fry it, right? And you layer together these things. And so you go from a basic piece of tofu to a crispy, fried, sweet, sour, salty piece of delicious tofu, right? So at home, when you're cooking, even if you're just making a basic sandwich, consider texture and consider laying together all these flavors, right? And that's why something like a basic tomato and lettuce sandwich, which has, you know, a little bit of umami from a tomato and maybe a little bit of salt when you salt the tomato, can be completely transformed by a crispy piece of bacon, because then you're adding your umami and you're adding that crunch, right? And if you put a little bit of honey to glaze the bacon, now you've got sweetness. So you've gone from a tomato and lettuce sandwich to a sandwich that has umami salt, sugar, crispiness, fat, again from the bacon, and usually if you use a little bit of mayo. And so that's the difference that I'm talking about. You have to understand the flavor profile of the dish. And let me finish by saying this. In New York City here, what a beautiful place. Food is very, very simple, and you can learn to cook by just understanding basic theory, okay? Following recipes can only get you so far, but understanding what makes a recipe good, understanding what makes something like hollandaise taste good, whether it's, you know, the egg yolks, the lemon juice, the herbaceousness from the tarragon making it béarnaise, all these things that you're adding, right? Why do these recipes taste good? Think about it. Why does a grilled cheese taste good? Why does a BLT taste good? Why does fried chicken taste good? And you start looking at them and analyzing and realizing they all have these salt, sugar, sweetness, crunchiness. There's umami involved, right? There's fat involved, and there's all these layers, right? So just start thinking that in your home cooking. The example I gave with the pizza is a perfect one. Look at the video on the 99-cent pizza. That has everything you need to know in one 99-cent pizza, right? So stop really worrying about reading recipes and start just thinking about the theory that goes into a good dish and start trying to apply that. And chances are you have a ton of ingredients in your pantry already that can add one or two of these elements. You don't have to hit all five. You don't have to be Rene Redzepi at Noma. You don't have to transform, you know, a strawberry into a strawberry cracker, right? You can just take a strawberry and add it to a little bit of goat cheese in a salad and add a little bit of sweetness with the leftover fig syrup that's sitting in your pantry, or a little bit of honey, right? And you can start playing with adding a couple of these dimensions. Go from being like 1 or 2 dimensional to add a third or a fourth will transform your food. So I want to leave it at that. Thank you. I hope you learned something. Take care.